Matrix is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of Shorts with Liz Clark.
Welcome back to Shorts with Liz. Today, we are heading down under virtually, unfortunately, to chat with Ozactive Chair Emmett Williams and former CEO Barrie Elvish. Fresh off their Leaders Forum in Canberra, they'll share what progress is made with policymakers, how Ozactive is promoting physical activity in national policy, and what lessons the U.S. might take away from Australia's approach. Let's jump in. Welcome.
Hi, Liz.
Thanks for having us, Liz.
Yes, thanks for being here. So far, you're my guests with the best accents. So you guys are already in first place for that. So thanks for joining.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start a little bit with the big picture. Can you tell us a little bit about the key takeaways from the recent Ozactive Leaders Forum in Canberra? And maybe what were some of your goals heading into that event? And do you think progress was made within government halls?
So, Liz, I think
probably for you, Barrie. Yep.
Yeah, it's probably appropriate to share with the viewers that the forum in Canberra had two components to it. In the morning, we had a closed room session in one of the Senate rooms in Parliament House in Canberra, where we brought together about 20 of the CEOs of the larger franchise groups, and Emmett very skillfully chaired a meeting under Chatham House rules to talk about a number of issues for our sector. That took place in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we hired the theatre in Parliament House, and we brought together about 90 allied health, complementary associations, key players in our sector in Australia. They came together in the theatre, and we were addressed by, I think, about 10 politicians representing both the government and the opposition, from health, physical activity, specialist politicians as well. And they presented to us about what their views were, how we could help them. We'd briefed them beforehand and said, we want you to talk about what our sector can do to help you develop and initiate policies that relate to the health of Australians. We also had a session from a scientist, a specialist, talking about the impact of GLP and what that might mean for our sector. And Emmett had arranged a speaker who's the new president of the RACGP, which is the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, which is the peak body for doctors here. And he gave a presentation also about how we would be able to interact with them. I think in terms of the key takeaways, I might hand over to Emmett and let him give us a few ideas there.
Yeah, thanks, Barrie. And Liz, let me suggest that this idea came from HFA. In fact, it came from an event that I attended in 2011 with URSA, which was essentially a fly-in all the way back then, right? And I remember meeting with industry leaders in DC and visiting different congressmen and women. Anyway, when I moved back to Australia 10 years later, the conversation initiated between Barrie and I pointed to what HFA were doing because I could see from afar what people like Mike Levesque and others were doing with the Congressional Challenge, with MyZone and all the other leaders. So we tried to take direction from that fly-in to the point that we called the working title of this event was the fly-in until we came up with our own name. And there were two key objectives. One was to show the leaders of our industry that we have relationships in Canberra, we have momentum in Canberra, which is our DC, and that we have opportunity in Canberra. And on the other side of the coin, it was to show the MPs that we have the attention of the leaders so that we could suggest to them that we are the partner for them, that it's not just the peak body that wants to partake in the conversation, but it's the leaders behind the peak body that can execute at the grassroots level. Now, we have a systematic approach to this. It's not just about flying in once a year, talking to politicians and putting a budget submission in. We have programs that engage the politicians in exercise, but we also have programs that engage the general public in exercise. And when you bring it all together, and we can talk about this in a moment, when you bring it together, it's very much an integrated approach to helping the government achieve their objectives, helping employers achieve their objectives, helping the general public achieve their objectives. And if you help enough stakeholders achieve their objectives, guess what? You can help our industry achieve our own objectives.
Liz,
When
I
you
think
say
it's
that you meet with,
sorry,
oh yeah, go ahead, Barry. Sorry.
I think it's worth adding that this was the second CEO forum in Canberra. It was a much bigger one because the afternoon section brought together similar-minded organisations and individuals. But the first one actually tied in with the launch of our Fit for Office campaign, and we had a similar number of CEOs come down. Again, we met in Parliament House. We didn't actually have that much interaction with politicians during the day. We had a dinner in Parliament House. We had some politicians, the sports minister, shadow health minister, and so on, come and speak to us. And then the next morning, we launched our Fit for Office campaign from Canberra at the Parliament House gym. And that was a great opportunity for politicians to actually circulate with the CEOs and get that sort of cross-pollination already starting to happen. It was a very low-key, social, happy event. And I think that laid the groundwork for this year's, which was much bigger and much better.
Yeah. I'm curious when you say you meet with the government, just because I'm not as familiar with Australian government structure, were you meeting with like ministries of sport or departments of health or elected officials or kind of a mix of all the above?
All of the above. So we would meet with ministers, assistant ministers, with their opposition counterparts. And I guess it's worth, for the benefit of the viewers, just a very brief explanation of how it works here in Australia. I mean, we're both obviously democracies, but they're actually quite different in the way they operate. So we have an official opposition to the government here in Australia. There's a leader of the opposition, and the opposition policies are developed universally and accepted by the opposition, and they're put as an alternative to the government policy. So we meet with government ministers, assistant ministers, members of parliament from both sides of government and their opposition counterparts. We also meet with senior bureaucrats and people who are involved with policy development and so on.
Is there always an opposition?
We do that very
I feel like
regularly.
it's like it relates to Star Wars a little, the opposition. Like, is there always an opposition?
Yeah, it's similar to Congress, right? Right now, the Democrats are in the minority. So the minority essentially has a leader, just like you do with the leader of the House and whatnot. And you have this not equal, but have this opposite leader who holds the government to account. Now, one thing I should add is that in our lower house, which is the House of Reps, there are 150 seats in that house. There are 75 in the Senate, which is our upper house, and the House of Review. So if you add that together, you have 225 legislators in Australia. And Barry referenced Fit for Office. We're 2 years into that. Our third one commences in about 2 months from now. And last year, we engaged 50 of the 250 legislators, right? So about 20% of the two houses, which after 2 years is good going. It's
great going. Yes.
Yeah,
they've got a lot on their plates. That's tremendous.
Yeah, they do. They're all very busy, a lot on their plates, but it's also representative of the penetration rate in Australia, right? It's about 20%. And of course, we've gone after the low-hanging fruit, those that already exercise. It was easy to engage them. But we've also pushed into those that don't do enough exercise and worked with them on the narrative of the benefits of physical activity, both economically and socio-economically.
Yeah. So I'd be curious, right, because these are CEOs that are used to running their clubs and their businesses every day. They're probably not used to doing this as an everyday matter, or even an annual matter, or a couple times a year. How do you prepare your members for this, and industry leaders for this to come? What they're going to expect? How to advocate with these policymakers? And is it something similar that like the HFA does, where we do a policy briefing for our folks, and then we all go sort of charge the hill, if you will? How do you get everybody ready?
Yeah, look, Liz, I'm familiar with what you're talking about. What we did was a little bit different. We did provide pre-reading. Some thought it was too much and didn't read it all. Some thought it wasn't enough, right? And the survey feedback suggested that. So we just need to work on the pre-reading for next year to get it just right. But unlike the fly-in DC, We didn't break into small groups and go off and visit the legislators as pods. We didn't do that. We formed in one room and we had a lot of presentations and discussion and Q&A as a group of 100. However, I'm very aware of what HFA do, breaking into the pods, and some of the feedback from the attendees through the surveys was exactly that. It would be great if we could peel off and have some intimate conversations with these legislators. So I think it's fair to say going into next year, that is the opportunity. How do we break them into small groups, give them their talking points, right? And then put them in pods whereby they can have those intimate conversations.
Yeah, I mean, there's strength in numbers, and I think there's comfort in numbers. And I think that you'll learn the more that you do this, the more comfortable everybody gets. So that's a great sign that that's the feedback this early on with these. So you mentioned a little bit, right, of fit for office, but what are some other current advocacy priorities that Ozactive is focusing on? And how are they aligning with national health economic goals of Australia? So for example, anything in the workforce development, preventative healthcare, public access to fitness programs, perhaps Fit for Office touches all of that. But if there's anything else that as a priority that you're working on, we'd love to know.
Well, it's really all of the above, Liz. We have an out-of-budget submission in with the government at the moment, which has got three main components to it. Last year, we went down to the government and asked them to look at tax deductibility for gym memberships, which I know the HFA has done as well. The response we got from the government was they weren't interested in doing that because they believe that it would benefit higher income taxpayers, which is quite true. And with a Labor government, which I guess is closer to a Democrat type government in the States, that's not something they would support. However, they are interested in providing what we would call physical activity vouchers for adults on a means tested basis. And what we propose to them is that they provide a means tested voucher to the value of about $1,000, so the Australian. That would cover the cost of a gym membership in a 24/7 facility Australia-wide. So that's the first component. The second component is we have a situation here in Australia where employers pay what's called a fringe benefits tax, depending on the context of their workplace and their workforce. So, for example, if I was a boss and I had a gym on site, I could provide that gym membership to my staff without paying any tax on that as a benefit to those staff. If I had a gym next door, which was run by a franchise group or independent gym, I would have to pay fringe benefits tax. So it's quite inequitable in that sort of situation. And to put that in context, the gym in Parliament House, which is a beautiful facility, the members down there have a subsidised membership because they don't pay fringe benefits tax. So we're trying to get that, address that discriminatory policy addressed. The third part comes to a public health campaign, and we want the government to actually invest in a public health campaign encouraging Australians to move. Not to go to a gym, just to move. They can walk, cycle, swim, surf, whatever they want to do, just start moving. And the reason why we're not pushing going to a gym is because the government would see that as a vested interest and they would not give it any airtime. But we also know through government data here in Australia that for every two people that consider starting an exercise regime, one of those two will go to a gym. So if we can get another million Australians exercising, we know that 500,000 of those will go to a gym. We believe as an industry association, if we can funnel those into a gym, we have done our job. Then it's up to the gym to recruit and retain them, on an ongoing basis. So we have a submission into the government to fund a program of physical activity in Australia over a 3-year period. They are the main, agenda items we are pushing at the moment, and we're getting some reasonable airtime there. We're also asking them to expect. We have our private health insurance here in Australia does provide benefits depending on the level of insurance you have for gym memberships or the use of a PT. We're wanting to have that expanded to more people here in Australia.
Very similar to. Go ahead, Emmett. Sorry.
No, I was just going to add, Liz, that some of the reports that we used were thanks to the GHFA, which is a subcommittee of HFA, as you well know. The Porter's report on price elasticity that showed the effect of providing a discount was phenomenal. And to Barry's point, it showed that the biggest effect was with the lower socioeconomic groups. So that work and those that funded that work is really valuable. And what's interesting is that 12 months prior, as you know, I'm a council member of the GHFA, and we'd finished our first project, which was the economic and socio-economic impact of our industry. Anyway, we had this council call approaching, and the day before that, Barry and I were at Parliament House meeting with the shadow health minister, right? So that's the health minister who's not in government but holds the health minister in government to account. And she's very supportive of what we're doing here. And when we spoke about tax deductibility and these types of things, she said, look, let me give you a tip. You better prove that this is going to provide more than just a benefit to your current customers, and that
Yep.
will reach further into the population, move the needle, and that needle moving then has economic and socio-economic benefits for the country. And it was that suggestion that the next day I brought back to the GHFA council and said, "Hey, look, we've got another project, and I've got an idea. This comes directly from the lips of a legislator," and that was the impetus to put some money into that report. So a shout out to the GHFA and all those who funded it and who were behind it. That's exactly what our industry needs to do. We need to work together on synergies that provide reports for us to advocate locally. Now, something else I should add about Fit for Office and our community program, Million Moves. Fit for Office, similar to the congressional challenge in the US, is all about engaging legislators. That is, the objectives include having fun with exercise, building a relationship with legislators, and providing a platform for us to discuss budget submissions with them. That's the purpose of that. However, one of the legislators participated in 2023, which was our inaugural Fit for Office, but he wasn't in Australia at the time. He was at the United Nations in New York at the time, representing Australian Parliament. And his staffer mentioned to him that there was this exercise campaign, and he was absolutely devastated because he wanted to participate in it. He rides his bike around his electorate every year and meets with his constituents and whatnot. Anyway, we were able to get him a MyZone device from Chicago to New York overnight, because in America, when you send something overnight, it's actually overnight, which is fantastic. He received it, he participated, he came back to Australia and said, you know what, how do we take this to the general population? And that was the genesis of Million Moves. However, we didn't use wearable technologies in that campaign because we didn't seek the prohibitive nature of cost and whatnot. Rather, we made it an opt-in pledge, which was very light, very easy. And to Barry's point, it was just about getting people physically active because we know the knock-on effect of that. And so by having both these campaigns, we have this high level legislator interaction, but then we're down in the grassroots working with the general population, and we're proving back to the legislators that we're an industry that can work with them and support them on their journey to get the nation more physically active.
Yeah, and that we can measure it. I think that's the other amazing piece of this, right? Like, I think so many industries come to these guys with ideas, but how valid are they, and who can show the results?
Yeah, and we have universities working behind the grassroots campaign to show this. Now, one thing that might resonate with your American viewers is the Got Milk campaign. Now, in Australia, we had something similar back in the 80s called Life Be In It. Or if you weren't in Australia in the 1980s, Slip, Slop, Slap, which is about putting sunscreen on, is something that might be more familiar. It's those type of campaigns where we see the government being able to help us and us being able to help the government. We have the right message, we have the right network. We just need the air support of their funding to run this type of campaign, to get Australians off the couch, to get them more physically active. If that's walking around the block, great. If, as Barrie suggested, 1 in 2 of them decide to go to the gym, fantastic. And from a commercial perspective, the way we've explained it to some of the CEOs and the operators who are so, commercially focused is, imagine the federal government, who you pay tons and tons and tons of taxes to, imagine they were financial support to help with lead generation and to progress people from considering exercise to acting upon exercise.
And Liz, just to continue that narrative, we've just, as Emmett indicated, we ran that pilot million moves on the Sunshine Coast in a very confined area of Queensland. We've just completed statewide million moves initiatives in the whole state of Queensland, the whole state of Western Australia, and in 2 large regional cities, all funded by state government money or Institute of Sport money. And we've exceeded the targets that the government set us threefold in terms of getting participation. And I was literally down in one of the regional cities a couple of weeks ago, dancing on a school stage with a local member of parliament, demonstrating to the kids about exercise. That member of parliament is in the government. She's on the government side. She's a very strong supporter. That's come from Fit for Office, Million Moves, and now half of Australia's running a Million Moves campaign funded by the state government. The state governments, that ran for a 3-week period, and we were able to get our members to open their doors. A lot of our members open their doors free of charge to the public to encourage people to come into their gyms. There's lots of other activations in a non-gym context. But just anecdotally, one gym came back to us and said they had 105 people come into their gym over that 3-week period that had never been inside that gym before, never had a gym membership. Now, if you look at a conversion rate even of 20%, which is very low, the ROI on that is fantastic. Now, if we can actually convince the government to fund that on a national basis for 3 years, possibly 3 or 4 times a year, and then convince our members to open their doors to get people in, it becomes a very strong commercial argument. And to follow up on what Emmett was saying, it's actually the government subsidising advertising for your facility.
Yeah, I think that the industries that have figured those out are brilliant. You mentioned Got Milk. That's something that I think every industry in the United States refers to that campaign. Everybody wishes they could find one because it was so brilliant. Another one was the Texas did, back to the state funding side, and it was Don't Mess with Texas. And that was actually an anti-litter campaign that the state government paid for. So we have no shortage, I think, of opportunities on messaging and just a great healthy message to get people to move. You said, we talked about our penetration rates a little bit. Ours in the US is almost at 25%, and we'd love to see it, we'd love 30%, and we'd love the whole world to be at 30%. And so we've got to really be, a BHAG, a very big, hairy, audacious goal to have 30% of the world moving by 2030. And we need to all be working on that together. Now, and how do we get them, to move off the couch? Yeah, to move around the block. But when I think move, I hope that they don't move to Australia, because I could see why that would be enticing right now too, because Australia is such an amazing place to be. So I'm going to ask this next question, which we maybe have already answered a little bit through some of the answers already. But as Ozactive has long championed the integration of fitness into the healthcare system, how have those efforts evolved in recent years? And where do things stand today? Are we seeing formal recognition of funding mechanisms to treat fitness professionals as part of a healthcare team?
I think since COVID, which was terrible for us as obviously as a business sector in Australia, but actually a blessing in disguise for what was then called Fitness Australia before we transition into Ozactive. What it has done is enable us to present to the government the importance of our sector in the preventive health environment. The government here in Australia has got a commitment to spend 5% of the health budget in preventive health initiatives. They currently spend 2%, so they've got a long way to go. The politicians that came and spoke to us at the forum we started with in this discussion all indicated the importance of preventive health and our involvement in it. So we're getting the lip service at the moment from the politicians, and many of the politicians, including the Treasurer, even the Prime Minister, exercise regularly. The problem we're having at the moment is getting through Treasury and the bean counters, basically, because they want an immediate return on investment. They don't look at a longer window. Having said that, though, any advocacy, as you would know, Liz, is a matter of chipping away until a crack appears, and then you actually get that crack to open. And I do personally believe that we are well down the path of having that happen. We, as I mentioned before, private health funds here in Australia, which is when individual Australians take out private health insurance, they do fund gym memberships, partly. They do fund the use of a personal trainer, partly. You need a referral from a doctor or an allied health practitioner to get that rebate, but all you have to do is go to a doctor, and if you're overweight or you need to exercise for your mental well-being, it's very, very easy to get. That's something which is opened up. The largest private health insurer here in Australia, which is called Medibank, will only deal with AUSactive members. We have an exclusive agreement there, and that's backed up by the legislation the government has passed under how private health operations can work. As I said before, Emmett had arranged for the new president of the RACGP to come and talk to us. These discussions are taking place, and if COVID did anything for us, it enabled us to reposition our industry in the eyes of policymakers, politicians, and I guess peripheral organisations and environments to actually acknowledge that we have a key role to play here. And the importance of exercise with mental health, of course, is front and centre now. One of the people that came and spoke to us in Canberra is the government's envoy for mental health. He's an ex-Olympian, he understands. One of the other speakers is a Paralympian, they understand. So it's a matter of bringing those all together. And one thing they did say, and we haven't actually mentioned this yet, is that we can strengthen our case to government by coming back with other supporting bodies. So the Heart Foundation, exercise physiologists and that sort of gear, because everyone goes down to Parliament saying with their hand out, everyone wants a piece of the cake. So they're saying if we can come back with a unified position, and that's a real challenge for Ozactive moving forward, because the health sector is very territorial in Australia. People are very protective of their current funding agreements. They don't want to let anything go, even if they actually will acknowledge privately that by working together we can get a better outcome. So that's a challenge for Ozactive moving forward.
Well, let me just add there, Liz, that we've also been very successful with grant money from the states, right? Which is proof of life, right? It's proof of life at the state level that we're going in the right direction. Now, just to put Australia into some perspective, particularly for your US viewers, the population of Australia is 27 million. I think that's very similar to, say, the state of Texas, potentially the state of Florida, right? So that's the population size. We have, from a peak body size, we have about 23 employees. So it's not a perfect comparison to HFA, because we also address the professionals and the instructors and trainers in the industry. But from an employee base, it's a similar size peak body, right? We have 20% of the legislators at the federal level who are engaging with us, like I mentioned before. We have 100 leaders flying into the Capitol, which is probably similar to what you're seeing there in the US. We've got Fit for Office going into the third year. We've just completed the second year of Million Moves, which is that grassroots program. We've had budget submissions that we've been fairly persistent with, calling for the four things that Barrie's mentioned, which includes tax deductions, funding, and more spend on preventative health. But as you look further forward, we have the Olympic Games coming to Australia in 2032. So the next Olympics, if I'm not mistaken, are in LA in 2028. And then 4 years after that, they're in Brisbane, Australia, 2032. Now, Olympics of the past have not done a good job at changing the behaviour of the general population. However, the opportunity to leverage them is there. And we as an industry are absolutely committed to taking that 7-year view from now and leveraging million moves, leveraging fit for office, really being persistent with our budget submissions, and then getting ourselves to the Olympics and being the first Olympic Games ever to have a legacy which has a positive effect on the physical activity of the general population. And if you want to talk about gold medals, Australia prides itself on winning a lot of medals, particularly per capita, right? We always divide our medals into our population to compete. That's our little trick. And when you do that, we compete well.
But it's fuzzy math, fuzzy math.
Fuzzy math,
Just kidding.
exactly.
Just kidding.
Exactly. However, where we're not winning gold medals is around physical activity. In fact, if you look at an OECD report that looked at 148 countries, right? Australia ranked 144 for adolescents when it comes to attaining physical activity guidelines and what have you. So we're a long way from gold medals, and we need to make sure that the legacy coming out of that Olympic Games is very much about moving up the leaderboard.
Yeah, I think I talk so much and it sounds so simple, but just the fun of sport and what that can do to keep people moving and keep people active and to eventually bring you into a gym, I think is so important. It's a rage going on here in the US is pickleball. And, it's starting to spread around the world, but it's a pretty fun sport. It's an easy sport, but it's getting people moving. It's getting people exercising. It's getting them into the gym. And I say, I'll take whatever we can get to make that happen. And so both Barrie and Emmett, you both said a couple interesting things that I wrote down about the way you've been able to shift and move some of these policies, right? First of all, is repositioning yourself after COVID. And as Barack Obama once said, is a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And I think that you've done a smart job of redefining yourself, repositioning yourself as preventative healthcare. So kudos to you. You've also done a great job moving some of these initiatives with putting these coalitions together that you talk about of other voices that maybe weren't at the table. And I believe the more of a sort of diverse, unified coalition of supporters you have, the stronger you will be. And so it's great to see alignment and that has been your approach. We could spend the whole time talking about mental health, but we don't have enough time for that. But and of course, really understanding how exercise impacts mental health and what that means. And I think we all saw data that came out a few years ago that people for more so than ever are exercising for their mental health versus their physical physique. So I think that's also a great story that we're all telling. But I'd love it if you could just oh yeah, go ahead, Emmett.
Sorry, just to pause on that one because it is a key one and it's something that's come out of Australia. The University of South Australia conducted meta research only 18 months ago, looking at over 100 reports, and it showed that physical activity was 1.5 times more effective when it comes to addressing mental health issues like anxiety and depression than both talk therapy and pharmaceuticals. And so that's a homegrown meta study. The meta study did include studies from around the world, and that's one of the metrics that we're taking to Parliament and knocking on the door with.
As you should. Can you explain a little bit more, just for those that aren't quite as familiar with what Fit to Office is, and then also what the Million Moves grassroots movement is?
Yeah, I'll do it in a nutshell. So fit for office is a take on the concept of are you fit for office, right? As a politician, and we're taking the literal meaning of it. Are you fit enough and healthy enough to make decisions and to run this country? So what it is, it's using historically it used the MyZone wearable technology platform to run a 4-week exercise campaign where there was a leaderboard that the politicians participated in. And yes, there was a gold medal, there was a silver, and there was a bronze. Some of the politicians said, I don't want to compete with that. I'm not going for gold, but I certainly want to beat my counterpart on the other side of the aisle. And it became a little 2-horse race further down the leaderboard. So think of it like a walking challenge in corporate wellness, right? That's what it was. But it wasn't using steps because steps is not what we're promoting, and steps are actually not the driver of good health. Good health comes from physical activity, which is defined as intensity and time. And so we we pointed to the World Health Organization's guidelines, which are also the national guidelines and also the CDC in America's guidelines to be relevant to some of your audience, which called for adherence to 150 minutes a week of moderate activity or 75 weeks of vigorous activity. And that's what the MyZone system was measuring. And then, as I said, then it sort of dovetailed into a leaderboard from there. And there was a lot of fun with it. You know, we had ultra marathon runners at the top of the table. We had politicians that did polypedal, which was a bike ride for politicians that participated and, you know, leveraged those type of events to get to the top of the leaderboard. But essentially the message was physical activity is about time and intensity, and this is what the guidelines are. So that was a 4-week campaign. Over at the Million Moves level, that was a grassroots campaign. And what we did was we leveraged the number 75. And that is because 75% of the Australian population do not meet the World Health Organization guidelines around physical activity. And so by pointing to that number, we asked the general population to pledge that they would do 75 moves a day, and that they would sign up to the pledge and then commit to that. Now, a move might be an air squat, right? And a move might be a push-up, a move might be a jumping jack or a star jump, and we're asking them to do 75 of them a day. So it was easy, it was simple, and the idea was to get water fountain discussion going in the workplace and at the schools and at the community clubs, so that we could get those people off the couch and just doing something simple.
I think those are both so fun, so achievable, and so brilliant. I love both of those efforts and something I think we can learn. Ozactive obviously has had a really intentional and strong approach to political engagement and industry positioning, a lot of what we've already talked about today. Do you think there's any learnings that you could share with either the US or other international federations who maybe aren't quite as far along, as quite as organized as what you've all been able to do? How, you know, maybe how to get started or some sort of watch outs to be careful of?
That's a really interesting question, Liz, and far be it from Emmett and I to sit here and tell others how to do their jobs, because every country has a different, obviously, context, political situation, and all the rest of it. I must say that we've taken some of our lead from AUSactive. I think that in some ways they are probably about 2 years ahead of where we are here in Australia, and a lot of the things that we've been talking about are versions and modifications of what took place in the UK. If we think of Fit for Office and then what came out of the Million Moves, which are both fantastic initiatives that have really, I think, demonstrated to the wider community, and we had unbelievable media coverage over Million Moves. It was just fantastic. It was really, really good. Million Moves has been really good because it actually positions Ozactive in the community, but also positions us in the eyes of our members. So rather than just being an advocate body, we're actually doing activities which they are seeing in the community, which they can actually, you know, participate in. But what's happening in the UK now, which we're using in our discussions with the government, is that you may or may not be aware, but the Labor government over there did a review of the National Health Service, which is very similar to what we call Medicare here in Australia. It's our national health insurance, which covers all Australians. They've done a review and they have decided to make a 10-year pivot to preventive health, a conscious decision because it's currently financially unsustainable to keep going just addressing the supply side of the health problem in the country. We have the same situation here where the government is under increasing pressure, but it's because they continue to invest in the supply side rather than demand side by reducing demand through preventive health. So the Labor government's make a 10-year pivot to do that. They've actually now decided in 15 counties of the UK that they are going to fund doctors to socially prescribe and give gym memberships to their patients that otherwise may have been given an unfit for work certificate. Now, not unfit for work that you can't come because you've got a cold or the flu, unfit for work permanently. Now, if you take that in the context, which is what the discussion is having with the government here, a person being on the taxpayer cost as an unfit for work person being on a disability pension costs the government money. You get them back into the workforce, they're actually paying tax. It's a complete 180-degree turn. So I think there's a really good opportunity for us to watch what's happening in the UK, modify that here in Australia, where it suits the politics of the government in place. And the government here is probably going to be in place for at least the next 10 years. The opposition that we've referred to in the past is it's basically dysfunction at the moment. They just can't get their act together and all the rest of it. So we have to work with what we have, which is a Labor government, which is why they don't look at tax deductibility, but they look at vouchers, means tested, and so on. So we have to adapt our policy to suit the government. You can't go in to this government and say, we want tax deductibility, because you're talking to a brick wall. One of the other benefits we have here in Ozactive, as Emmett touched on, our membership is not just for private gym owners. We have a lot of not-for-profit gym owners and gym businesses, including local government. Local government is a big provider of leisure centres here in Australia. We also have, of course, the individuals that work in those facilities or work in studios or work outdoors and so on. So I guess our constituency is quite a bit, it's wider than HFA. So we have to be cognizant of that as well when we go and talk to government. That in some ways is a handicap, but in many ways it's a huge advantage as well, because we represent a bigger part of our sector.
That's a great point that you raise. I'll tell you, I've talked to many folks in the nonprofit community here in the US, and it's interesting times, to say the least, based on our current federal government and what they're valuing and what they're looking at might not be what governments before have. So just as you have to deal with, swings in the government, we all do. And I think part of what we always say as an association is that, we are not a political organization. We're just going to work with who's ever in the seat. And I think we've got a great argument altogether, on that. To that point, and maybe in closing here, how can we continue to work together to really better globalize this movement that we've talked about and all of these efforts that we've talked about to really bring additional physical activity into the public health as a real priority?
Yeah. Let me jump in there, Liz. I think that there's a real opportunity for the GHFA to bring, and also the Federations Council, to bring different countries around the world together and to swap best practices, right? So we've shared a few here, some that we've borrowed from HFA in America, some that we've created ourselves. We've had better success with some than others, and by sharing best practices, we can help each other grow, but also to sustain with this notion of research and reporting. I think that, in recent years, we've done something like $300,000 or $400,000 worth of research reports, and both those reports have been material as it relates to our advocacy work out here in Australia. Now, there's no way that we could have justified in Australia with Ozactive spending that sort of money, but globally we can pitch in and we can create these reports, and we can therefore advocate locally with them. Then the opportunity beyond that, of course, is interacting with the World Health Organization, and we've had varied success over the years as it relates to that. They have a recommendation out there known as GAPA, the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity, which is great, but it's not a silver bullet. The Australian government signed up for that, and then they ignored it once signing up for it 2 governments ago. But that doesn't mean that the World Health Organization should not continue to push forward. So coordination for the benefit of best practices and sustained research.
And just to challenge some of that, and I guess as the outgoing CEO, just a plea to the people that may be watching this. I think the World Health Organization is a bit of a red herring, to be quite honest. I've been involved through World Active UK, UK Active, Europe Active, and I've heard HFA etc. talk about getting a seat at the table with World Health Organization and so on. I think that's a rabbit hole to go down. The government here doesn't really reflect or I won't say respect, but I don't think they really listen to what World Health Organization, that's a mouthful this time in the morning, is trying to say. I really think that each national organisation needs to develop advocacy policies that fit their national situation. I think we should be learning from the mistakes and successes of our counterparts internationally. I think international organisations need to put aside what I perceive as being competition amongst each others for market share in members and so on, and actually work more constructively together and use the strength of the whole rather than the individual components. I think there's a huge opportunity. Emmett's mentioned the Olympics coming here. Australia is focused at the moment on productivity, increasing productivity. We know from Harvard University and other research taking place here in Australia and in the UK, the importance of exercise during the day or before or after work to increase productivity. There's a lot of opportunities. We need to use success in other countries, other jurisdictions. Watch what hasn't worked, because there's no point in doing the same thing, but please work constructively together, because if we do, we're going to have a joint success much sooner, in my view.
Well, I don't think we could have closed on anything stronger than that, Barrie. I can't agree more with you, with Emmett. We are stronger together. We are stronger as a whole. We've seen that, and we're going to do more and more of that. So I can't thank you as partners and friends, thousands and thousands of miles away, for joining me today, and just for all of the long history that our organizations have spent together, and just really excited for the future and harnessing the energy of this tremendous industry. So thanks for joining me today, and have a good one.
Thanks, Liz.
Matrix is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of Shorts with Liz Clark. With over 20 years as a dedicated supporter of the fitness industry, we're thrilled to continue a partnership geared towards success for all those who believe in better.